The third video David has made is about a book called White Feather, and this is actually a book he co-wrote with his mum, Catherine MacPhail. And the story is set during or just after World War I and suitable for probably ages P5, P6 up to S1.
Hello everyone, my name is David MacPhail and I'm an author, and it's book week. So I'm talking to you today from my study. I'm not there in front of you obviously, apart from on a video screen. I'm talking to you for the Language Hub, which is one of my favourite places, by the way, an absolutely amazing place. I live out in the countryside, in the middle of nowhere, and I wish I had somewhere like the Language Hub on my doorstep, because it's terrific. It's a place you can go and you can learn different languages. You could, if you're a parent, you could take your little kid there and you could do things like bounce around and rhyme time and stuff like that. And you can meet other people who are learning languages or even native speakers. And you can practice yourself and have a little coffee and everything like that. It's a fabulous place. So pop in if you get a chance, by the way. So I'm going to talk to you today about books, because it's book week, and this whole virtual thing is, I think it might be the future, I don't know, of me doing it on screen and then you watching it. What we've decided to do actually just now is I'm going to do a short video, and then if you guys have any questions, you're going to send the questions into the Language Hub, and I am going to answer those questions in a further video, a follow-up video. So get your thinking cap on if you have any questions and let me know. Okay, so I thought I would talk to you today about White Feather, which is a book that I wrote with my mum. My mum's Cathy MacPhail. She's been writing longer than I have. She has loads and loads of books, much more than I've written. And my mum is a very, very successful writer. She's written books like Another Me, which was made into a movie recently, and also this one, which is Devil You Know, which was a phenomenal book from Floris, from Kelpie's Teen actually, and this was a terrific book. And one of my personal favourites, which is Mosey's War, which won the Scottish Children's Book Award a couple of years ago. It's set in Glasgow. So we decided to write this book, and it's set at the end of World War One. So it's set just about maybe over 100 years ago, and it's about a time when all the soldiers were coming home from the war, and there was a pandemic. There was a global pandemic at the time. Spanish flu was sweeping across the world, so a similar situation in some ways to what we have now. And it's really about how war affects people and how it affects families and stuff like that, because it's set on the home front. And what I'm going to do, without further ado, is read to you from the first chapter of White Feather. This chapter is called Coming Home. It was over. After 4 long years, the war was finally over. Flags were flying. The band was playing. The whole town was celebrating as the soldiers marched past. The boys were coming home from the war. But not all of them. Not Charlie. Tony stood at the back of the crowd, pressed against a wall. He tried his best to keep his tears from falling. He was a man now, almost 16. Men didn't cry. Charlie, Tony's big brother, his best pal, wouldn't be coming back. Charlie was lying somewhere in France, in a field of blood and mud, lost forever. I shouldn't have come to the march, Tony thought. I should have stayed at home with my mother. Tony's mother refused to believe her eldest son would never return. It was all a mistake, she said. Charlie wasn't dead. He'd come home, she insisted. He was already home. She'd seen him with her own eyes. Tony would never forget that day. His mother had been waiting for him at the front door when he'd come home from work. Charlie's back, she'd said, and she dragged Tony into the kitchen. There was no one there. Charlie was sitting here a minute ago, Tony's mother said. She ran her hands along the back of the wooden chair by the fire, as if she could feel Charlie there still. "I didn't even hear him come in," she told Tony as her face glowed with the joy of it. "I came in the back door with the washing off the line, and there he was, sitting there, so handsome. My boy." And all that day she'd waited for him to come back again, to sit in the chair by the fire, and she'd waited every day since. She never gave up hope. Even when the news came, Tony's mother refused to believe it. She insisted it was a mistake, that the army had confused her son with another woman's boy. Tony hadn't just lost his brother, he had lost his mother too. The boom of the big drums passing close by jolted Tony out of his dark memories. The crowd cheered. "I should have been with him," Tony thought. "It would never have happened if I'd been there with my brother." Tony was a year younger than Charlie, but they'd always looked out for each other. Tony would have protected him. He would have found a way to save Charlie. Yet he knew in his heart there was no point going over it. Nothing Tony could do would change anything. The cheers rose again, and Tony's heart bled with sadness. He wished so much he hadn't come. There was no place for him here. He'd go now, before anyone in the crowd recognised him. He would slip into the shadows and head home. But as he moved, Tony saw a woman approaching him. Wasn't it Mrs. Aubrey, Charlie's old teacher? At first, he thought she was going to brush past him without a word. Her eyes never met his. But as she came close, she reached out and pushed something into Tony's hand. Only then did she glance at him with a look that was cold and hard as the iceberg that sank the Titanic. Tony knew, even before he opened his hand, what Mrs. Aubrey had given him. A white feather. The white feather was a symbol of cowardice. That there was a point during the war, especially at the beginning of the war, World War One, where women were going round and handing white feathers to men who weren't in uniform, shaming them into joining up and going to do their bit and what have you. So that's where the title of the book comes from. We came up with the idea one morning, sitting round my mum's breakfast table, and we were eating our rolls, drinking our coffee. Sunday morning. I was still in my pyjamas. So we started talking about writing a book together, because we always wanted to do one together. And then we just said, yeah, let's go for it. But what are we going to write about exactly? And we thought and we thought. We started to discuss the idea of an anniversary that might be coming up that we could tie a book into. And so we knew that at that time, the anniversary of the ending of World War One was coming up, which was in 2018, just past. So we thought, why don't we write a book about the end of the war? There's so many books about World War One. There aren't any books about what happened just after, about the ending of World War One, about the men coming home and what happened at the home front and how people dealt with all the suffering and stuff like that. And so suddenly we started sparking off each other and coming up with all these ideas. Within 20 minutes, we had the full storyline for White Feather worked out. So that was a very, very interesting conversation that we had, and that's how we produced this book. We were particularly interested in. We were interested in all the soldiers that never came back, and the ones that died when they were out there. But we were particularly interested, for the purposes of this book, in all the men who were shot at dawn for cowardice. The British Army shot hundreds of its own soldiers for cowardice during World War One, and some of them were really young. Some of them had lied about their age in order to join up. There was one man who they made a statue of, a boy called Herbert Burden, and he was only 16. He told them that he was 18 in order to get in. And I mean, they threw him into action. He was a 16-year-old boy. I mean, some of you may have older brothers, or sisters, or cousins who are that age. They threw him into fighting, and he just couldn't handle it at all. He ran away. And because he ran away, he was brought in front of a tribunal of military officers, very, very stern-looking men with big moustaches who looked down at him, and they wanted to make an example of him, of Herbert Burden. And he didn't have any lawyer to speak out for him. They never gave him one. You can probably imagine. I mean, he was totally and utterly distraught by what he'd seen, devastated. And he was probably just an ordinary sort of working class boy who was maybe a bit intimidated by all the aristocrats lining up in front of him and was staring down at him very sternly for having run away. He was terrified. So could he have even spoken up for himself? I don't know. Anyway, they did make an example of him because he was taken out at dawn and shot. And that happened to many, many men during World War One. So this Herbert Burden was the model for Tony's brother in this, Charlie, who turns out is shot. There's also obviously a ghost in this book, so I wonder who the ghost's of. Well, you'll find out if you read the book. So that's how we came up with the idea for this story for White Feather. It's interesting writing historical fiction. It's really quite tricky as well. If you have any questions on the story about this book or about war, World War One, or anything like that, or about writing in general, or about some of my other books, I've got a few of them behind me here. I write funny stories like Thorfinn the Nicest Viking and Top Secret Grandad and Me, all these kind of books. Let me know if you have any questions. There's a prize, or there are two prizes, because I'm giving away copies of Thorfinn and the Putrid Potion, which is the newest in the Thorfinn series. It's about a polite Viking who goes around basically making friends with people wherever he goes, as opposed to what the Vikings normally do, which is raid and pillage. And then there's Top Secret Grandad and Me, Death by Soup. So there's a couple of prizes to go out. So let me know. Get in touch with any questions and I'll answer them in the follow-up video, okay? Thank you very much for listening. Thanks for your time, and I'll speak to you all later. Bye-bye.